Support for this episode comes from Gvoke HypoPen. Gvoke HypoPen is a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above. If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you're at risk for your blood sugar going too low. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready to treat very low blood sugar with Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more. Go to gvokeglucagon.com/Stacy. That's gvokeglucagon.com/STACEY. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on top of your kidneys called pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacy Sims.
This week, it's hard to believe that just a generation ago, doctors were telling newly diagnosed people that they shouldn't play sports with type 1 diabetes. My guest, Chris Bright, is not just an example of how wrong that thinking was and is. He is actively helping others pursue their dreams with T1D. Chris was diagnosed as a child back in 1999. He is the founder of the diabetes football community. That's soccer here, but you know what I mean. Chris shares his early challenges, how his mother's experience with type 1 affected their family, and what he wants you all to know about playing any sport with diabetes. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. Always so glad to have you here. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. If you're new around here, welcome. My son was diagnosed with type 1 when he was 2 years old. He's now 19. My husband lives with type 2 diabetes. I don't have any type of diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting, and that is why I started the podcast back in 2015. All right, a quick Mom's Night Out update. This is our event for moms of kids with diabetes and more, frankly, women with type 1. I'm thrilled that we have a lot of adults with type 1 attending the events. I'm hearing from more and more of you who want more connections, so we're working on it, but feel free to come. I really appreciate that. All right, with Mom's Night Out, if you entered our contest, that has ended, and the winners should have heard from me by now about your free ticket to either Denver, which is happening in September, less than a month from now, or Philadelphia, which is October. Our check-ins are now opening up. This is where you get to sit down and talk to an expert about your situation. This isn't a medical exam or a checkup like that. It's all about just talking to a diabetes educator about how you're feeling, how you're doing, and then maybe getting some good questions to bring to your healthcare provider. So if you are interested in Mom's Night Out, you should be getting these emails. If not, you can always reach out, Stacy@diabetes-connections.com. The time is running out if you're thinking of attending in Denver, so please don't wait. My son, who I mentioned, who is 19, goes back to college this week. It's his sophomore year. Yeah, I can't believe this. Oh my gosh. Benny asked me last night if I wanted to pack his diabetes stuff for him because he knows it'll make me feel better. I'm not sure how to feel about that. I mean, he loves me, right? That's a nice thing that he wants me to do for him. It's not about being lazy and he doesn't want to do it. Trust me. He knows that if I put together his giant back-to-school diabetes box, I'll sleep better at night. I'm not sure what that says about me, but I promise I'm letting go. It's just, it's a slow process. Okay, I have followed my guest, Chris Bright, for years on social media. He is super inspirational, and he really walks the walk when it comes to showing the diabetes, an inspiring but still realistic way to play sports at the very highest level. This is not a guy who is all about diabetes will never stop you. I mean, it hasn't stopped him, right? He's done what he wanted to do. He's achieved incredible goals. But, in the moment, and he'll talk about this, diabetes, it's there. It's a pain. You got to do stuff. It can't stop you. He's also a fantastic ambassador to people without diabetes. He does a lot of work representing the community in the UK. I was surprised to hear what he thinks the best technological change for him was, but it makes sense when you hear it. All right, we are talking about football, as well as futsal and a lot of other sports stuff, along with how to manage T1D along the way. And that is right after this. Diabetes doesn't always have to interrupt your day. Dexcom G7, a continuous glucose monitoring system, sends your glucose numbers to your phone or receiver. Know where you are and where you're headed without finger sticks and without interruptions. Dexcom G7 is the most accurate CGM, and it's covered by Medicare. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Finger sticks required if symptoms or expectations do not match readings. See user guide for instructions. Data on file must meet coverage criteria. For full prescribing information on risks and benefits, visit Dexcom.com. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad to finally talk to you, have you on the podcast. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm amazing. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate coming on. I've been a listener of the podcast for a little while, so I've listened to many episodes, and I think it's always great to hear the stories that you share. And yeah, thank you for inviting me along to, I guess, talk a little bit about mine.
Yeah, well, I follow you on Instagram, so I see all the great stuff you're doing with the kids. And, why don't we start there? Tell me a little bit about the diabetes football community, what you guys are doing now and why you started that.
Yeah, so I guess if we start it with why, it comes from personal experience. I found it challenging growing up with a condition, and football was my background, and I suppose soccer for anyone listening in the States. So we better get that one out there.
Call it football. Call it football here. That'll be more natural for you.
Yeah, I'm going to call it football,
okay,
but
perfect.
If anyone's listening, it's definitely it's soccer. But that was my background, my thing. That football came before Type 1 for me. I was already this kid that loved kicking the ball around. I was in a team already, and then Type 1 came in, and it made things challenging for a number of years. And I'm sure you'll have heard and seen some of the impact of being on, say, mixture insulin and old school ways of managing Type 1 diabetes, which is a long way from where we are. For quite a lot of people, I guess, in, say, the States or the United Kingdom, where I'm from. But those challenges really, I guess, fueled a bit of a chip on my shoulder to want to try and do something in the future to tackle what I'd felt. I guess, isolated, probably a little bit frustrated at what I was feeling around me and how people accepted Type 1 diabetes or didn't, or made comments, the stereotypes, the stigma. And that all gets heightened quite a bit, I think, in sport, where elitism is really at the forefront of where they've got their attention on. You're trying to shoot to be the best. Therefore, any potential thing which deviates from someone's view of what elitism is, which unfortunately, living with a medical condition, it does. You do face the kind of people looking at it and going, what's that? Or a comment or here and there. So for me, some of what I'd faced and seen growing up fueled that fire to want to try and tackle some of that within the sport that I loved and the industry that I loved working in, or being a part of. So I had my own kind of individual career playing football in a sort of part-time way, earning some money on the side. And then equally had the opportunity to play futsal for the Wales national team. And that all kind of really then at that moment sparked my fuel and my idea even more to say, right, it's time for you to start giving back. You've done certain things now. You've got this opportunity to potentially share a little bit about you, but bring people on a journey to say what you've faced and some of the things that have been there in the past isn't quite right. And actually we can create a community now which addresses that. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve, is we're trying to provide that inclusive environment for people with the condition. We want to bring people together to participate with each other, learn from each other, feel supported by each other through the vehicle of football, and ultimately educate at the same time. So you bring all these people together, you make them feel more confident about tackling sport, but also we've got to go out there and try and challenge some of that thinking which exists within society in sport about the condition. So that's then, how do we do that? We do ideas and projects like a UK all Type 1 diabetes futsal team or soccer team or football team, whatever we want to call it. And we put a big statement out there, piece, and that kind of goes, what's this all about? So then you get people talking in the mainstream about what's this team. So we've done that kind of piece of work. We've also worked on guidelines to try and educate coaches and facilitators alongside the big third sector charities in the UK, so Diabetes UK and JDRF UK as well. So we're in that space of kind of really trying to encourage participation and really also trying to educate and bring the two together to do something powerful for the community.
All right. I have so many questions, but my first one is a definition. We understand football, soccer. What is futsal?
Yeah, so futsal, it's FIFA, so I guess the lead governing body of soccer or football on the planet. It's their version of five-a-side, so indoor football, indoor soccer, and it's played into sort of like field hockey-sized goals or handball goals. It's on a kind of court which is not too dissimilar to basketball. And actually, it takes some of its rules from basketball and handball and then mixes it with football. So there's lots of roll and roll off substitutions. It's really fast paced. There's lots of goals, lots more action. And because it's on a tighter court, the pace and the intensity of it is like bang, bang, back and forth, back and forth. So it's like the 11-a-side version of the game, but you pressing fast forward on the remote and you're speeding it up. So that's kind of how I would liken futsal. It just so much action, so many goals, and these crazy tricks and skills that you see sometimes on courts all over the world, and you might see clips of it. Sometimes that's taken from the futsal court.
That's great. Okay, more sport coming up, but back to diabetes. Can you take us through your diagnosis story? You alluded to the difficulty. I mean, you were diagnosed as a kid at a time when the technology was very different. How were you diagnosed? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I've got some memories of it, and I can imagine it probably is etched in my mind sort of forever. And I imagine for a lot of people, it's there and it doesn't go away. And it was a really, really tough time. I don't remember much of it other than the moments where it happened. So the symptoms and the build-up were quite subtle, I think. And my mom and my dad would say that they're spotting it, and I've got no idea really what's going on. So I had the classic 4T symptoms. The thing that would, I guess, masked it a little bit was it was the summer. And you probably have heard this lots of times as well, Stacey, that I was diagnosed in early September. So as soon as the weather started to change and I wasn't running around as much and I wasn't on my school holidays and I was going back to school, all of a sudden my mum was like, he stopped all the running around, he stopped all of the football, and he's still drinking lots. He's still losing weight, and he's still going to the toilet a lot. And I don't know about the fatigue. I never really picked that one up with my mum, but it became apparent when we hit September. And also something to note in this, which I think talking more about, it would be great as well for lots of people. But my mum spotted the symptoms because my grandfather had type 1.
Oh.
So my mum has only spent in her lifetime, she's not got the condition, but she spent 2 years without type 1 in her life. And I always think she's kind of forgotten because it was her father that had it, then it's her son that's got it, and she's had it around her entire life, and that must be almost as draining and challenging as, it's two of the closest people that she's got. So I always feel for my mum because she's had to deal with that most of her life. She's had 60 odd years of type 1, but she won't get a medal for that 60 odd years. Whereas, if I hopefully make 60 years with type 1, there'll be some kind of medal and celebration of 50 years in the UK. I know they do a medal for that. So I just think she should get more recognition for that. But she spotted the symptoms and the signs. I was taken to a GP surgery, so general practitioner kind of doctors, local doctors. And yeah, it was spotted it straight away. I think in my urine sample, it was ketones, and then it was straight to hospital, tested on a finger prick. It was 24, 25, I think. And then it was, you've got type 1. And I always remember it because my mum got really, really upset. And at that time in my life, I was 8 years old. I'd only seen my mum get that upset for one other thing, and it was the passing of a family member.
Wow.
And it was actually the passing of my grandfather. So to see that, you automatically, as an 8-year-old, you just go, this is the worst thing that must be going on with me right now, because my mum is sobbing and I don't know what's going on. I'm getting upset just for not knowing what's going on. It was straight to the hospital. I remember my dad was at work, and he just, everyone rushed in, and I was there in hospital then for 3 or 4 days. I think it was 3 nights, 4 nights. And I think in true my style after that, by the end of the week, I'd obviously diagnosed on the Monday. And then on the Friday night, I played my first football match with type 1 diabetes. So I think that probably sums up everything that I've kind of been about following that.
I'm going to stop you there just for some quick translations. When you said your blood sugar was 25, 26, obviously we measure it differently in the States. That translates to something like 430 or 450. So obviously very high blood sugar. And this went by quickly, but I always like to point it out because I think it's fabulous. In other countries, I think it's specific to the UK, they came up with this 4 T's for diagnosis, which is toilet, thirsty, tired, thinner. I think it's brilliant. I try to talk about it every November for Diabetes Awareness Month for, our mainstream media here so they can get the word out. I think the only reason it hasn't caught on here is because we don't like the word toilet in the United States. Whenever I say that on the news, like I go on local news all the time. I used to work in broadcasting here in Charlotte, and I'm always like, I want to come on and talk about diabetes awareness. And I say that, and the newscasters are always like, oh, toilet, ooh, ooh, ooh. And I really think it's an impediment to getting this very simple, great message out there. So as you listen, the 4 T's, they have great campaign literature about this in the UK. I really think we should start using it because thinner, toilet, thirsty, tired, or whatever order it comes in is just so succinct and brilliant. So back to brilliant, Chris, you're back on the football field. I mean, you're a little kid, so I'm sure you don't have a specific memory, but overall, your mom had a parent with type 1, so she knew the limitations of the disease, certainly, but it sounds like she also knew how to get you right back in the game, so to speak. Do you remember any concerns, how you did that? Did it go okay? Right back to our conversation. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Omnipod. When you're deciding on a brand of insulin pump, there are a lot of things to think about, especially if you've never used a pump before. It can seem overwhelming. There are a lot of choices, and you want to make the right decision. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about Omnipod 5. Curious about trying an insulin pump or seeing what life without tubes is all about? Unlike traditional tubed pumps, you can try Omnipod without being locked into a 4-year contract. You might even be eligible for a free trial. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo for full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions. Also visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections.
I think it was really interesting as a parenting style. My mum, maybe because she'd been around the condition for a long time and she'd seen my grandfather kind of be able to do the things that he carried on doing, that she was of the kind of, you are going to do whatever you would like to do in your life and we're going to make it possible for you to do that. And my dad wasn't not like that, but my dad was far more planned and organized and kind of trying to facilitate that and in the detail a little bit more and maybe slightly more on edge with it. So we had quite a nice balance of the two of them kind of working together on attitude and the way that I then approached the condition. So it was kind of, if things went wrong, my mum would be like, pick me up and go, right, you're going to go do it again. And my dad's kind of like the thinking, what do we do next time to try and make it better so it doesn't happen again, whatever happens. So we've kind of got this really nice style of the two of them. And that helped me. I think that built a mentality in me that I would work things out. I would try and understand the challenges. And if something goes wrong, try and fix it or try and we know we can't fix it. I mean, second guess it a little bit more if it is at all possible. But I also have that mentality of I've always just got on and I've just given it a good crack. And I think that was very early on apparent. I would play football, I would go for it. But ultimately, being a football child with mixture insulin in 1999 to the early 2000s, I was a shadow of what came in the years that followed it when I moved on to, say, basal bolus, because that insulin is just not capable, in my opinion, of maintaining somebody who's super active and wanting to try and play sport at a high level.
Yeah,
so difficult because it's just so variable, that insulin at the time. So we tried our best, work things out, but the first few years it was like 1 week I'd be really good on the football pitch and you'd be like, wow, this really isn't affecting Chris. And then next week you would try and implement a similar routine and it just falls apart. And then I would not play as well and get frustrated, but I always just took it on the chin. I never really used diabetes as an excuse for a bad performance, which in hindsight, there were so many bad games as a result of diabetes. But at that time, I didn't want to use it as that. And I wanted to show everyone. And I think it probably built the chip on my shoulder. I was like, this thing is never going to stop me. And I'm just going to prove people wrong. What I didn't realize was that all the resilience I was building at that time because of that kind of attitude.
Yeah, it's so hard. And as a parent, you want to tell your kid diabetes can't stop you, but you want to be realistic and say, hey, it's okay if it does sometimes. Right. And that's that very difficult balance. I don't think any of us have really figured it out. Right. We're all struggling with it because nobody wants to use diabetes as an excuse, but it's certainly an explanation. And it's so hard. So I give you so much credit But, when we talk about technology, we are also talking about insulin. So you went from, I'm assuming, NPH regular 30/70, whatever it was back in the day, to MDI. It's so funny. It's not that long ago, right? I have a lot of new listeners and they come home from the hospital with a Dexcom and maybe a closed loop system within a couple of weeks, which is great. We don't want to keep that from anybody. But I remember when my son was diagnosed, and I've told this story plenty of times, they had just approved long-acting Lantus, long-acting insulin for little kids. So we were able to start on MDI, and our endocrinologist was like, you guys, this is great. Like, you don't know what a huge advancement this was. So we thought, like, we are state of the art. When did you wind up changing to something more like MDI? And then can you kind of take us through, I assume you have different technology now, CGM, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I guess my biggest statement around this, and an interesting thought, is that probably the biggest technological advancement that I've seen, which changed my life the most, was moving from mixture insulin to basal bolus. So that multiple daily injections, all of a sudden, all of the things that had gone before where I had no flexibility in the times that I injected insulin, I had to eat food at the same time every single day for 5 years. All of those things started to change. And as a result of moving on to this new regime, I could inject at different times. I could eat at different times. I had more flexibility, I had more routine. I had less hypos. All of these things were game changing for lifestyle, game changing for me. And as much as technology comes in now, and it's incredible, and it is the next level up for my life and what I've experienced, that gave me the most payback in what I was able to do. It changed my life in that moment. That was around 2005 that I moved on to that. I was about 14 or 15 years old. And all of a sudden, I talked earlier about inconsistencies in football. All of a sudden, energy, more consistency, routines that we could work out so that my levels, we were able to second guess them a bit better. And you could see it. All of a sudden, the things where I was struggling to get opportunities, I always thought I was good. And then all of a sudden, the opportunities started coming. I was playing for regional teams. I started to get some opportunities to play and get trials at professional football teams across, in the local area as well. And these things weren't there before. So the only thing that I can link to that is this change in my regime for how to manage type 1 diabetes. And as a result, from then on, it just kicked on, and I was able to represent regional teams thereafter, travel around the country playing football at a good level of it, and kind of enjoy that and take that on. And then kind of, as I get into that university young adult life, which is, let's just leave it as interesting. I think it becomes more, I guess, more challenging. I think that was where it's that kind of switch over from Stacey and knowing your story a little bit.
I was going to say, I have a kid who's going through that. Be careful.
Exactly. That switch over from mom and dad being heavily involved into me being the person that looks after it. That switch over was an interesting process to go through, one that we all have to go through.
Yeah.
And there's a few years there where it was difficult, and it gets more difficult again. But then you come out of it and you grow up and you start to see what you need to do. And then then that's a few years like that. That's probably a good 10 to 12 years. Was it longer than that? 2005? Yeah, probably about 12 years of just being on finger pricks and multiple daily injections. And then we hit about 2017, 2018 time. And that's when I, for the first time, got to use a flash glucose monitor. So I used a Libra very first time, and then got to use Dexcom in 2018. And I've been on a Dexcom G6 pretty much since 2018 until now. And I moved to hybrid closed loop Omnipod 5 system in October last year. So I'm coming up to a year on hybrid closed loop. So my tech is also an interesting point is I'd never used an insulin pump before I jumped onto hybrid closed loop. I don't know how frequent that's going to be, but that was my journey and story with the tech.
Yeah, I think it's more and more common, not because people are getting closed loop systems after long periods of MDI, which still happens, but I think it's happening. That's their first system because that's what's now available. And that's what people are able to move to, which is really incredible. We started this talking about the diabetes football community. And I'd love to go back to that, incorporating your diabetes management and how you talk to these kids now and young adults about their diabetes management when they play. For the folks listening too, with the disclaimer that everybody manages differently. This is not something that you can say everyone should do it like this or like that for the best results. But overall, what is your advice for kids who are super active with sports?
I think there's a lot of learnings I've taken from those individual experiences, which I try and bring that into it, but I also try and bring everybody else's experiences now that we've got so many people within this community, from parents' perspectives, the other adults, and we've got people involved in our, say, men's and women's WhatsApp groups and community, which have varying experiences of the game at high levels and kind of grassroots and early stages of it as well. So I kind of listen a lot to the community and work things out. And I try and, I guess, position it out there as these are the key areas to have a think about. So there's kind of thing, the kind of thing I'm talking about is like posing questions. So I wrote a blog post recently on the website, which really helped to pose questions about, are you thinking about a routine? You know, having things similar on the game day will help you try and work out what's going on with your blood glucose levels. If you provide your glucose levels and your diabetes with lots of variables on game day, you're going to struggle to work out if things go wrong or things go well, what you can attribute it to. So if you try and reduce the variables of other things going on, and I mean by sort of trying to understand when your active insulin is, if you do it with plenty of time before exercise and you almost come into a fasted state, you've got a good opportunity of seeing, okay, well, this is mostly just what the exercise intensity is going to do, plus other factors, whether that's stress, nerves of the game, whether that's the weather. You can take away one factor of active insulin in there. So it's kind of, in my mind, I'm trying to encourage people to think about, can you help yourself by reducing a few variables? So I talk a lot about routine. I'll talk a lot about insulin active time. I talk a lot about, reducing boluses and reducing insulin prior to you and levels to try and aim for and start at. Then about preparation. So having the right fast acting glucose around so you can make fast adjustments. Talk about having insulin available so you can again make adjustments if levels are going awry. Hydration, all the sorts of things you'd expect in that kind of sport and environment. But my key thing is just about routine, approach, similar foods, because it helps you second guess where things are going in that scenario and in that place. And especially if you're exercising at different times of the day, because you kind of need to work that out as well. You've got insulin sensitivity to roll in there, where at the start of the day, you might be a bit more resistant. At the end of the day, you might be a bit more sensitive. So we just need to try and second guess, put that down, write some ideas down, and then you can kind of, what's like a bit like a tick list, really. Tick them off. Right, okay, right. I've done that. I've done a bit of a routine. I've kept fast acting bolus away a little bit. I've got all my insulin around. I've got all my fast acting around. It gives you a better chance of success. And success is different for everyone. So it's not like we want to go out there and say, oh, this is what you need to do to be the greatest person ever playing a sport on the planet. This is whatever success looks like to somebody, whether they just want to go out and walk the dog, whether this is just whether they want to go for a jog, a light jog, a long walk, they want to go to the gym. It just is helpful to have some ideas about variables, reduction of them, give yourself something to be able to work out afterwards. And you go, it went really well. Document why it went really well. If it didn't go well, document why it didn't go really badly and look for something else you could tweak next time.
Sometimes you learn the most from the mistakes. I mean, that's really, something goes
100%.
wrong and you're like, oh, I don't have to do that again. You mentioned earlier advice for coaches and other, people who are the support staff. And I remember when Benny was small and he played lots of different sports. That was always the hardest part for me. The kids on the team are always easy. They have questions. They want to support Benny. They always wanted to help. Somebody always wanted to carry snacks. Like those kids are easy. It's sometimes the coaches that you have to really work with. Any advice? I know you have big advice and you have lots of resources, but anything you'd want to share?
I think there's some work going on in the UK around trying to establish more education out there for coaches. There was also some research done by JDRF UK about, I guess, the gap or the community's perceptions of the gap. So there's a stat actually rolling round of the people that were surveyed in this, which was parents of children as well as adults living with type 1, that was asking about, do you think coaches, facilitators, PE teachers are knowledgeable about type 1 diabetes? And the stat was 6% thought they were.
Yeah.
So it's a really small number of people that think that there's knowledge out there. So as a result, it does give an opportunity to use the evidence to talk to national governing bodies of sport and say, is there an opportunity here to do some work, to do some education? So that's kind of where I'm thinking is the best place, or where I'm trying to focus some attention in my area. So reaching out to, say, the national governing body of soccer in Wales, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland. Again, big sports in the UK, things like rugby union. Again, probably won't have heard too much. It is rugby in the States, although it's growing. I know it's growing, but it's not a basketball. It's not a baseball. It's not an American football. So there is rugby, cricket, netball. Some of these sports are all large-ish in the UK. So we're kind of trying to reach out to those governing bodies. We're trying to raise awareness. So it's, how do you use that evidence to say, could you come and help us raise the education up there? And we've got a set of guidelines which were co-created with Diabetes UK, JDRF UK, and the diabetes football community, which is kind of signed off by the Football Association of Wales. So that exists. So anybody could download that. And that is a, 12, 13-page document, which gives the basics. And also it views it from a coach's perspective. We're not trying to be too detailed here. We are literally trying to give the coach and put ourselves in the coach's shoes about what should you know about diabetes. We don't want to put them off about including someone. We're just giving them some ideas about the numbers, the sort of things that children or adults might have around them to look after their type 1, and also some tips and advice from the community about how would you coach someone with type 1, and just giving them some tips and some to help with that inclusivity around them within sessions and games.
We'll link everything up that you talked about, to make sure that people can get the resources. But before I let you go, Chris, what do you love about football? Why is this the sport that you loved as a kid and you continue to love now? What is it about this sport?
It's hard to put your finger on one specific thing. There's a number of things. I think from an early age, the feeling of scoring a goal on the pitch, there isn't many things that you can experience which kind of tops that. And that becomes a little bit like something you're chasing. It's like a high that you chase after that. And that feeling of scoring a goal is pretty amazing. So sorry to all the defenders out there that do not score many goals, but I'm an attacking player and I set them up, or have done in the past. I'm not saying I've set them up now. I'm getting a little bit older now. But in terms of the past, I've certainly set quite a lot up and scored quite a lot in the past. And there is no feeling like it. It's also just the way that the game plays. You're all involved. There's action, there's camaraderie, there's team, there's tribalism in the UK because it's the UK's largest sport. You get this feeling of rivalry between teams. And when you're a fan of one team, it's you go to a game as well. The atmosphere at a Premier League game is just like nothing else. The fans and the fanfare which is around it, you're probably liking it to American football in the States. Those are the kind of parallels I would draw to it, because it is just, it's like that gold dust feeling. You can't really put your finger on it, but it's just how it makes you feel, the ups and the downs, the drama that's involved, the late goals which win a game. Yeah, excitement. It's all of that. And as you can tell by me talking about it, I couldn't put my finger on one thing, but you can hear in my voice just how excited and passionate I get about talking about football. So I could do it all day.
I love it. I wish I had better questions for you. I always feel bad when I have athletes on the show because I'm like, I played soccer as a kid, but it was all about the orange slices at halftime for me. So
good bonus as well.
Motivating, right?
Yeah.
I did mean to ask you too. Have you seen Ted Lasso? Is that an appropriate, is it a good rendition?
It's a good comical kind of link to it, because they did a lot of work actually at trying to bring it out, and a lot of people in the UK do watch it. So they have captured the ethos of it really well, but with more of a comical kind of take on it. So yeah, it is pretty good. It is pretty much along the right lines. I've only seen I haven't watched it all, but I've seen a few episodes, and it is pretty good. Pretty there or thereabouts.
I love it. Well, Chris, keep us posted on everything you're doing. We'll get the word out. We really appreciate it. Thanks for everything. I really appreciate you spending some time with us.
You're welcome. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed the conversation, Stacey, and thank you again for having me on.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information about Chris and the diabetes football community and the guides that he mentioned, All of that over at diabetes-connections.com. I'm going to link up some videos about Chris as well. I just think he's fantastic. I can't believe it took me so long to talk to him. Although I guess we've been doing this for almost 10 years. So I'm kind of finding out the old school folks that I haven't had on yet. And there's always new people, unfortunately, entering our community. Quick story before I let you go. I played soccer as a kid. I wasn't kidding about liking the orange slices the best at halftime. I have great memories of my mom like yelling from the sidelines. We're a lot alike, and encouraging me. But also, perhaps, well, I'll put it this way. I think in this day and age, she may have gotten a red card here and there, but, meant well. I didn't play soccer my whole childhood. I switched to softball a little bit later on, then I swam in high school. Benny played soccer for 5 minutes when he was about 5 years old, and he used to stand I don't even know the names of the field. He used to stand by his own team's goal, and then the ball would come to him, and he would kick it. And, he was a bigger 5-year-old. And it would get all the way across the field, and sometimes he would score a goal just from that. So he didn't run a lot, and he always thought, well, this is a dumb sport because all I do is stand here and kick the ball. That was not one of my favorite sports for diabetes, I got to be honest with you. Soccer and basketball, which he played when he was older, so much activity, so difficult to keep your blood sugar up. So I can't even imagine Chris doing that on the older insulins. I've said this before, I really preferred baseball, which Benny played the most in his childhood. Nice and slow, lots of breaks. Hey, here's a quick tease if you stayed all this way. We're going to be talking to one of the few Major League Baseball players with type 1 diabetes. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. I've got him on the calendar to interview. Super excited about that. And I will be posting about it in the Diabetes Connections Facebook group before the interview so I can gather your questions. All right, thanks to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
You've worked hard your whole life. Diabetes management shouldn't slow you down. EdgePark is your trusted go-to supplier for all things diabetes management supplies and continuous glucose monitors, like Medtronic's Guardian sensor, Dexcom G7, and the Freestyle Libre 3. EdgePark accepts most insurance plans, including select coverage for Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans, and EdgePark navigates insurance complexities for you and handles the paperwork. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the EdgePark logo.